Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising, which was scheduled to be on UFOs and the nukes, but our two speakers today, Bob Salas and Stephen Bassett, have not been able to get on yet, so we're not sure what's happening. So I will frame the issue hoping that at least one of them can join in a few minutes. We wanted to talk about the phenomenon of UFOs and the nukes for two reasons. One is that, as you all know from my remarks over the last 6 months on Humanity Rising here, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists have put the atomic clock at 90 seconds to midnight. And just at the end of the Biden administration, they put it to 89 seconds to midnight. The closest to midnight that the bulletin has ever concluded was our danger zone since they started the atomic clock in the late 1940s, early 1950s. So even though most of the public had no awareness that the nuclear threat was as dangerous as it is, the news media did not mention anything essentially at all, except in the alternative media. The actual situation geostrategically was grim. I want to just note one particular event which really opens up the pathway to this larger discussion of UFOs and the nukes by observing that it was last October. There's Steve Bassett. Steve.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me get this on here. Might get the correct microphone up. Got it. Got the correct video. I'm in business.
Good, thank you. I wasn't sure you were going to join. Bob Salas hasn't yet, so I was just framing the discussion about the UFOs and the nukes. And I was pointing out that last October, when the tensions were the highest, the Russian military, for the first time in history, took its nuclear forces to the highest level of alert. I raise this not only to underscore the danger that we were in and continue to be in, but it was shortly after this that all the orbs began to appear in our skies.
Mm-hmm.
And the synchronicity between the escalating nuclear danger and the fact that starting in November, orbs were appearing by their thousands, not only over the United States and the UK initially, New Jersey predominantly, but all over the world in Asia and Africa and Latin America. And one of the characteristics of the orbs was to settle around nuclear bases and causing such a presence that a number of the bases were shut down temporarily. So this program is really about connecting the dots between, arguably even with climate change included, the nuclear weapons threat is the most severe. And the consequences of it taking place are unimaginable.
As we have known our whole lifetime.
As we've known our whole lifetime.
Is Bob going to be on with me, or is he following me? It doesn't matter, but is he going to be joining
me? No,
me?
I think he may not make it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
Mm,
so it's just you and I today.
okay.
But this conversation started, everyone, with what Steve Bassett, who you all know is the founding CEO of Paradigm Research Group and a co-founder of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, has been working with Congress to convene a committee hearing on this relationship between UFOs and the nukes. He brought Bob Salas to the hearings last November in our rally. Afterward, Bob Salas spoke, Steve spoke. Steve, why don't you begin our discussion today by just summarizing where you are personally in your contemplation of the relationship, what you're doing with the Congress, and then we can segue and discuss, the story and contribution of Bob Salas and others specifically.
Where am I? Okay. Well, where am I is I've been on uh very a substantial amount of antacids for about 2.5 weeks now after I got back from LA. Uh, I was very exhausted and tired. It was an 18 day trip, and I spoke out there, and other things were going on, and many flights. I was exhausted, and before I could even have time to recover, very the next day, I watched a rather interesting encounter in the Oval Office of the White House, 2 blocks from my office. And since then, I've been on a very substantial amount of antacids, having some serious problems. And prior to that, I was feeling just fine. Okay, so that's where I'm at. Not to mention the fact a couple of other mood drugs, which are legal but necessary. I'm uh, I'm not going to mince words here. I'm getting more and more in a I don't want to mince words frame of mind every day. The situation is grave, and that which is not to say that the work of good, thoughtful people who have been around forever, competing against the work of not good, not particularly thoughtful, very violent people, which has been going on as long as we can go back in history and probably to the very beginning of Homo sapiens sapiens, is ongoing and has to be ongoing. But the situation has transcended that, in a sense. In other words, we don't have enough time for enough meetings, enough sharing of intentions, and trying to instill higher consciousness in people, or going to the church and praying and whatever. All of those things that a lot of people do as they try to deal with a very violent and difficult world. There was a time when we could do that, and we've had some successes over the years, but we no longer have that time anymore. And so, what am I saying? Is that in my lifetime, which I've seen a lot, I've seen many political crises. I've watched many anti-war movements. I've watched many wars. I've watched movements, anti-racism movements and bigotry and all that kind of stuff. I've seen the efforts of activists who I admire. I've seen all of that, and I watched it and always held out hope. Uh, but this situation is unlike anything in my lifetime. I'm trying to think what it's comparable to in the United States, and the only thing that it's comparable to, as far as I'm concerned, is the Civil War, the period leading up to the Civil War, where the nation was pretty well divided in a way that hundreds of thousands of people killed each other in order to try to decide how that divide was going to go. That's the closest I can get. Now, this has happened in other countries within even the last 30 years, where other countries have gotten where we are right now, and we've watched them from afar and had pity on them and felt bad for them, and we saw the filming and so forth. There's something kind of like that going on in Syria right now, or what the hell is left of Syria right now, where people are literally shooting each other in the streets by the scores. And But that's not the only place. So the
What are the
situation.
factors in your mind that have brought the United States to this level of urgency,
About to go there. Not just the United States, the planet. All
the
right.
planet? So
And the
what are the
factors,
factors?
trying to point out the small stuff, of which there is an infinite list of small stuff, is you can go on and on and on and on. And I don't think you really get anywhere, though you need to know about that. But on the grander scale, if you want to look at the big variables, the things that have had the greatest force, what has gotten us here is one, we reached the point of being able to develop the ultimate weapon, the nuclear bomb, which we then built tens of thousands of and spent trillions of dollars on. And we still have about 13,000 ready to go at any minute. And there's various ways of delivery. And we have 9 countries that have these weapons and 3 or 4 more that want them. And we have dismissed that and try not to think about it, but it's probably the single most important thing humans have done in their entire creation. We built the ultimate weapon, absolutely, starting in the late 40s, and we have taken it to the point where we are ready to use them tomorrow and have almost used them on a number of occasions. We have been on the edge of nuclear war for decades, and we've gotten away with it, and we keep thinking we're going to get away with it. No, we are not. And so that's one thing, right? We build unbelievably powerful weapons, then build tens of thousands of them, right? And thus creating a kind of standoff, what we call mutual assured destruction. And under that umbrella, we were able to maintain lots of armies. And so since 1945, the human race in the collective has spent untold trillions, maybe 50, 80, $100 trillion on all of the necessary things to have your army, have your defense, protect yourself against another country, not just nuclear weapons, but regular weapons. We've also conducted dozens and dozens of proxy wars. And all of these trillions of dollars could have been, under different circumstances, used for another purpose. And what would that purpose be? Because the population, since we invented that nuclear bomb, has gone from about 1.6 billion to 8 billion. And the planet's still the same size. And so the money that could have been spent to try to make a world that could handle and service 8 billion people, as opposed to 1.5 billion, was spent elsewhere on destruction. And also the destruction we've been doing to the environment, which is what 8 billion people are going to do. Those two things alone have put unbelievable pressure on politicians, on civilians, on nonprofits, profits, business, whatever. It's like it's hovering over everything. 12,000 nuclear weapons, 50 countries spending trillions to defend against the other country. Why? The borders of the world are pretty much fixed now, except in a few cases, right? Well, the population grows to 8 billion and the amount of suffering going on is immeasurable. And so all of the goodwill, all of the wonderful religions preaching love and love thy neighbor and so forth and so forth and so forth for all of these centuries has gotten us to this. And so where's the upside here? Is there any upside at all? Right? Because I'm not interested in continuing the same stuff until the ultimate happens. The upside is this: by intention or by accident, but I'm pretty sure it's by intention. This last 75 years, when we took the standard human condition to the limit, took the planet to the limit, creating the potential for destruction beyond anything even Genghis Khan could have appreciated. In that same period, we've had a massive escalation of involvement by non-humans, almost certainly from other planets, engaging us in complex, elaborate ways. And these things are connected. We know that they're connected for many reasons, not the least of which is the matter of nuclear weapons, which is where Bob Salas comes in. It's where all of the nuclear witnesses come in, all the testimony regarding the shutdowns and other matters. And so we have this simultaneous thing going through time for 78 years, this
Yeah.
huge growing influence of ETs and the awareness of them. All right. The constant emphasis on the nuclear weapons issue by shutting them down, by hovering, craft of some kind or another over them, by putting images of future destruction in the heads of children and tens of thousands of contactees. These two things have been in parallel, which makes me think that there is a possibility that resolving this reality, which has now been lied to us. It's a lie. It's not been allowed to be true. So resolving this lie and converting it to a truth and opening up the world to full confirmation of the truth of the reality of this world, which is we're not alone. There are the civilizations. They're engaging us, which you can say it and it sounds fairly reasonable. And if you thought about it for years, but the thing is, if you just blank your mind and start over, you realize how unbelievably significant this is that getting that confirmation. So every single person in this world that can get to a computer or a phone or a telegraph or whatever will know, no matter whether they're educated or not educated, whatever language, that we are in a galaxy with multiple civilizations, and 4, 5, 6 of them are engaging us and have been for a long time. We must get to that point. If we get that out and everyone has a chance to step back, whether you're just a regular citizen or the leader of a massive country or a general with the control of massive armies, whoever you, or a businessman or an oligarch with billions of dollars trying to decide what mayhem you can do, every single one can step back and say, let's re-examine the way things are, what we're expecting them to be, what we want them to be in the light of this new information. And let me be as clear as I can be. If we do not get that confirmation, which I call disclosure with a capital D, and we do not get it very soon, like weeks and months, everything is going down the drain. If you are looking at the situation now and trying to imagine that, well, there's certain diplomatic moves that can be made, and I'm sure that so-and-so is going to back off here, or whatever the hell, you are sadly mistaken, right? The overall situation in this world is absolutely as bleak as it's ever been. It's 200 countries, 8 billion people, genocides, unbelievable travesties, more nuclear weapons, more countries seeking nuclear weapons. They're threatening to use nuclear weapons, not only on the ground, but in space. We're headed over the cliff. And so we don't have any time for just feel good, be nice, hope for the best. What we need is a whole scale, broad spectrum effort to get disclosure, not prove another sighting, not prove another case, not just inform people, guess what? You're not alone. To get disclosure, it is a political act to get the nations to come forward and confirm the extraterrestrial presence by the heads of state to the people so they know absolutely it's true. Now we want the rest of the information and let's rethink the planet. We have to do that. We are dawdling. We are kicking the can. We're praying. We're hoping. We're meeting. Meanwhile, the world is going straight down the mountain. All right. I mean, I don't know how much to say it. Suicide rates are up. The rates of anxiety, depressive, the use of drugs up. Right. Crime is up. Right? Genocide is up. The threats of nuclear weapons are up. Everything is going up. The only thing that's not going down typically is that a certain level of class in our world, whether it's oligarchs in in Russia, oligarchs in the United States, are getting more and more wealthy, billions and billions of dollars, which is not going to do them a damn bit of good when those nukes fly. There aren't enough bunkers. There's not enough security that will be able to protect them. But they have so much in their life and so much power, they're thinking it's okay, we'll be okay. They won't be okay. And so that's the situation. We have to now go political. Everybody has got to go political, right? And get this done. You've got people on the Hill trying to do it. We got to back them 10 times greater. We've got organizations that have been set up that are nonprofits. We need to fund them, not with tens of thousands, with tens of millions of dollars, which is basically, a long vacation for, the typical oligarch in the United States. I think I'll take a $10 million vacation, right? Or maybe a $100 million marriage to my fifth wife. We've got to get there. We've got to go political, and we are running out of time. Forgive me for being so harsh, but I tell you, it's not because I'm just in a bad mood. I watch the news relentlessly. That's all I do. No wife, no kids, no cats, no dogs. I watch the news 7 days a week, and it's really bad. right? No matter which angle you come from, left, right, down, up, doesn't matter. It's really bad. That's my message today. I'm happy to take any questions that you all have, assuming you're still here.
Well, thank you, Steve. I mean, I've been making essentially the same uh, point that there's a deep and profound simultaneity between humanity facing Armageddon and humanity's encounter with non-human intelligences, extraterrestrial beings who are warning us in every way that they can to stop what we're doing and basically begin to get it together. The what I'd like to do is you know Bob Salas very well.
Yeah.
I'd like to have you simply tell his story as you recollect it and know it, and possibly bring in others because he was at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967, which is one of the most famous of the UFO nuclear weapon facility encounters. So tell us about Bob Salas.
I'll go further than that. As it happens, there is a confluence taking place which serves the dilemma I just described. All right. A lot of people have gone to great efforts to try to get us to this confluence, right? Not just for years, for decades. And maybe too late. It is happening right now. And this is what I mean. As I pointed out, the single most important thing we know about the extraterrestrials is that they turned our nuclear weapons off repeatedly. How many times? Two minimum, could be 5, 6, 7, as well as turning them off in the Soviet Union. They also put them into launch mode, once here and once in the Soviet Union, which is another, even a stronger message, taking them out of launch mode at the last minute while everybody was having a nervous breakdown on the base. So that started happening back in 1966, rather, just 4 years, a little less than 4 years after we almost had a nuclear war over the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I happen to believe those two things are very connected. All right. And so the Air Force personnel, the officers and the security people that were present during, just talk about the two shutdowns in Minot and Malmstrom Air Force Base, were put on absolute, you must never talk about this mode. Whatever NDA they had, they intensified it. All the young security guys were immediately reassigned to different places around the world, particularly Vietnam, where many didn't come back. This was not something they could do with the officers. Of course, there were only a few. You had 2 launch officers at each of these bases, but they were, of course, under full classification, and they were the highest level of people you could imagine. And you can imagine the kind of person that you would put into a nuclear silo, give them a key and say, if the two of you turn these keys, you're going to destroy millions of people and we're going to go into nuclear war. But we trust you will do that if the president gives you those codes. That's the kind of people that are down there. And so they kept silent, but it gnawed at them. Now, that lasted from 66 to 94. Okay. So that's basically 28 years that these witnesses sat on this issue, eating away at them. But one person was particularly upset by it, possibly because, as he has stated publicly in a book, he is a contactee. That shouldn't shock anybody. Contactees can be anywhere, even in the bottom of nuclear silos. And as a result, Captain Robert Salas decided to come forward in 1994 and speak to what happened to him back in 1967. He sat on it for a long time. Finally, he saw an opening because some information was published about what happened then in the public arena. In fact, there was an article in the Minot newspaper all the way back at the time, but it didn't really quite show what happened, but it referred to it. Something else turned up, and he saw this as kind of in the public arena. Maybe he could come forward, still risky. He then filed an FOIA with the Air Force regarding matters related to that time without mentioning the dreaded acronym UFO. And he got a little information back. And he made the decision that now he was freed up of his NDA, whatever the hell it was, and he started coming forward. Now, this was 28 years after. And so time was also on his side. An awful lot had happened. A lot of activism had taken place by 94. The public awareness was growing. And so when he came forward, he was left alone. He wasn't spirited away. He wasn't threatened with death. He simply was left alone. And of course, that was good for us because what he proceeded to do as an activist is start recruiting other people who were present at these shutdowns to try to bring them together to come out, hopefully, beside him. In the meantime, Robert Hastings, a very high quality researcher, seized on this issue, resulting in a book called UFOs and Nukes, which is a definitive book on this subject, which also led to a documentary. And so Hastings and these witnesses started moving forward in time into the 90s, into the 21st century, trying to get this issue established. And they did in our world, in the world of UAP phenomena researchers, activists. Yeah, it was written about. It's been in a number of books, but the media absolutely couldn't deal with it. And they pushed it away as hard as they could. The Congress would not touch it. They had never had the opportunity to testify for 1 second under oath, right? Up until recently, Bob Salas had never been able to talk to a member of Congress. And the DOD acted like they didn't exist. That's about the best they could do. And so they were kind of up against a particularly tough wall of silence and a repression in a sense, because their testimony is the most important testimony of anybody on this planet regarding the UAP presence. That doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of events that have happened and a lot of things that have taken place that the people know about and they want to come forward, and some of it's fantasy, but whatever. The fact is, history is going to look back and say, this is the most important thing we know about ETs. This is the most important matter that needs to be resolved, is the tampering of our nuclear weapons, the messages they've been sending as we have moved closer to nuclear war. And so, after 30 years, Bob Salas was able to actually go up on the Hill because of Tyler Roberts having had meetings with some of the members up there and arranged a meeting with one of the Congress people who has been speaking directly to this issue in a nonpartisan way, very aggressively, Representative Nancy Mace. And so that meeting was set up. I was allowed to participate. She interviewed him on camera and indicated that she wanted the nuclear weapons people for her next hearing. I then had a chance to talk briefly to Senator Gillibrand, who had just had a briefing or a hearing with Kozlowski, the new Aero director, and she said that she would like to talk to the nuclear weapons witnesses. Bob Salas has also given a 2-hour briefing to Aero, which is something else. That was a while ago. Aero did absolutely nothing. When he asked if they were going to tell the Air Force about this, he said, we don't even bother because they're not going to do anything either. So a lot has happened behind the scenes. But where we are now is that Nancy Mace is going to call a hearing at her pleasure, but it could happen very soon. And there's an excellent chance that 4 witnesses in particular will sit down and take the oath in front of that subcommittee of the House. Captain Robert Salas, Captain Robert Jameson, not Captain, but Robert Jacobs, who's the one that took the film of a dummy warhead being tampered with by a UFO, and David Schindel. David Schindel and Bob Salas did testify once on this issue, but not at a real hearing, at a mock congressional hearing produced by Paradigm Research Group, 2013 at the National Press Club. 42 witnesses, 10 countries, 30 hours of testimony, 3 of which was from these gentlemen and others, including Dolan, about these nuclear tampering events. Right? 3 hours of testimony. That 3 hours of testimony back then was submitted to every single member of Congress, all 535. Recently, the affidavits and witness statements of 10 of these witnesses, some witness statements, some affidavits signed, I personally hand-delivered to every member of the Senate Intel Committee and every member of the House Oversight Subcommittee. So we're talking about 39 hard copies. I then sent an electronic copy to one of their staffers, and I sent the electronic the links to the videos of their testimony back in 2013. In other words, I did everything I could, along with others, to seed the entire array of the people engaging this issue with the nuclear weapons witnesses. And so it's possible that they will testify next. Why is that important? Because that testimony, which will be seen by millions, is not like Rush or Elizondo or Gallaudet, all of which are important, or Gold or Schellenberger. It is above that. All right. The world will learn under oath that these entities have repeatedly shut down the nuclear weapons of the United States and the Soviet Union, maybe China, but China doesn't give out press releases, right? And that is going to sink into their brain in a way that it hasn't before. And then we're going to get, and from there, we can go a lot of places. But that testimony is so profound, so important, and raises non-threatening aspects that I believe the president will confirm almost immediately. So we could be this close from the hearing that will trigger the president of the United States to confirm the extraterrestrial presence this spring. And I know we're that close. And I've given hundreds of interviews saying roughly this, and yet we're still not there. We keep pushing it off and pushing it off. Where the defense contractors gutted the UAP Disclosure Act, but kept half of it. Then the second time they submitted, they had to withdraw it. They say they're going to put it in again, and the Congress is going back and forth. Meanwhile, political chaos is happening. I get it. But nuclear weapons don't care about our politics or a hyper-partisan bullshit. They don't care about our issues or our problems. Nuclear weapons are raw physics. You launch them, and the results are extremely predictable. And they don't care whether you're going to be offended. They don't care if it's going to make you unhappy. And so we have to get those nuke witnesses in front of a committee as soon as possible. And the groundwork has been laid. But the political force being pressured, put on them, is still not great enough. People are still going off and looking at this and looking at that. And somebody comes up with a thing about an egg. All right, let's spend months or weeks and days examining the egg. No, we have enough testimony and evidence to prove the ET presence over 100 times over. We simply need to get that in front of the key members of Congress, which has been happening. But the first hearing since 1968 was May 17th of 2022. That was 3 years ago. So you see, we're still dragging it out. We're dragging it out thinking that, no, this is not going to go bad. It's going to be okay. We're going to come out of it. The nukes won't be used. The genocide will stop. All the threats and the nonsense going on will stop. No, no, we're going over the cliff. And until we get that, that's exactly where we're going to go. And so I'm going to start getting more aggressive about the fact that we have organizations like the New Paradigm Institute and the Soul Foundation and the UAP Disclosure Fund and MUFON and Ubiquity University and the State of the World Forum coming together, and they need millions of dollars in order to move this issue, right? Instead of having to go out and beg on the street for it, okay? They need tens of millions of dollars. And what's at stake is whether we have a civilization or not. How much motivation does a well-meaning, good-thinking, multi-hundred-millionaire, billionaire need to realize that of all of the things that you can support, this should be number one, right? There may be others that make you feel better, right? Donating to children's hospitals or whatever, saving cats and dogs. I understand that. But feeling better is not going to help you if we go over the cliff. And so the message is, we need the money, we need the focus, we need the attention to get a political resolution to the ET presence, and we need it now. And Bob Salas is in the front line, thank God. And let's hope that he's able to go forward and finish what he started back in 1994. And boy, the day those guys are in that meeting room taking the oath, I will be in the chair sitting behind him. And if you look at my face, you will see a guy that could not be more relieved and could not be more pleased, even happy, right? But until then, well, we're still just hanging.
Well, let's delve into the politics as you understand it that are occurring, or shall we say, swirling around the Trump administration, the Congress, in the aftermath of the election. What are you gathering, Steve, as you know, Washington, having lived here for many, many decades and been intimately involved with congressional um, and executive branch
following it. Yeah.
machinations. What's your current assessment of the state of play?
Well, as I say, there are um, two overriding things that have been going on in the last 78 years. And one was, of course, the rise of the nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons countries and the justification under the nuclear umbrella of mutual assured destruction of dozens and dozens of proxy wars killing millions. You've had that, and then you've had the population increase to 8 billion. And so those two things have put enormous stress on every country. It's put enormous stress on the UN as these countries have tried to deal with it. Okay, deal with these fundamental realities. The way they dealt with the war issue and the nuclear weapons rise was to spend trillions of dollars to protect ourselves against each other, money that we desperately needed elsewhere. And then where it was needed was dealing with that additional 7 billion people. And so since we didn't have the resources, you got 7 billion people, and a whole bunch of them don't have enough food or clothing or shelter or resources, and they're in total misery. Now, when people get miserable, they get angry. And when they get angry, they do bad things. And when people do bad things, they create grudges and feuds and pushback. And so just on this one single point alone, right. And again, I haven't said a non-partisan statement yet, and you're not going to hear me say a partisan statement. Trust me. When you've got 2 to 3 billion people more than you can possibly support with the resources you have, they are going to flee from wherever the hell they're living in and try to get somewhere else. They will cross borders. They will get in boats. They will drown themselves crossing the Mediterranean. They will do whatever they can to get somewhere safe. And so we have basically what amounts to a massive worldwide immigration problem that back in the 1900s was kind of like cool, right? Hey, people are going to go find a better life. We got plenty of space. Come here, make a life fine. That was great. Yeah, the population back then was 1 billion. Now we have 8 billion. And so that's just a simple fact. And you can't make that 8 billion go away. And so the basic, the ultimate, well, let me put it this way, where we're starting to finally deal with this, which has been coming for some time, is that we can't stand this anymore. We're a wealthy country, whatever. We can't stand this anymore. I don't care how miserable you are. I don't care what the situation is in your country. I don't care who's threatening you. I don't care how little food you have. Stay there. You're not coming here, right? And so you're going to see more aggressive protection of the borders. You're going to see more people getting more angry and frustrated. And there's going to be what? What comes when people get really, really desperate, angry, mad, and have grudges? It's called terrorism. We are living in the golden age of terrorism. Terrorism has never had so many ways to manifest itself, so many reasons for people to do it, and so many people ready to sign up. And so one of the aspects of political of this last 75 years is the rise of terrorism. And we just didn't deal with that either. We don't know how to deal with it. We make one stupid mistake after another. Somebody commits a terrorist act wanting to invade another country, and you immediately say, absolutely. And you go invade another country, creating another 100,000 terrorists, right? How stupid are we? We never thought to lock the doors on the cockpits of airplanes. I guess so that they could, anytime they wanted to, go get a drink or something. And guess what? A bunch of them got hijacked and launched multiple wars. I mean, this is just one of the aspects that we're trying to deal with politically. And so if you are frustrated with the gridlock that exists in the United States politics, where two sides are in a fight to the death, getting virtually nothing done, going from one extreme to the other, offending everybody when they go this way and everybody else when they go that way. If you're incredibly frustrated with the UN that simply doesn't function anymore, if you're frustrated with the breakdown of what we'll call of social contracts around the world, understand that there are huge primal forces that are creating this, not your political enemy, right? not somebody in a talk show you don't like. They're nothing in the scale of these things. There are huge forces
Exactly.
at work here in this world that are going to require much more than a few, meetings of good people trying to come up with a better way to go or just, meditating more. No, these are powerful forces that require a powerful, how would you say, interaction. And we have that at our fingertips, namely the confirmation of the ET presence. That's the only thing we've got. Other than that, we got nothing. And so I don't I stay as non-political as possible because that's just a distraction. It's a waste of time, right? Attacking the other side for this policy or not doing that or this or whatever, and refusing. We've been going round and round on this right versus left, blue red thing now for almost 40 some years. I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on electing the red people, then electing the blue people, and back and forth and back and forth. And how much has been spent on nuclear non-proliferation? Virtually nothing. And so while the red and the blue are fighting over few votes, and I'm president now and you're president now, we're sliding toward nuclear war. Well, what good is it going to be the controlling party of the White House or having the most governors in your party once those nuclear events start flying? You know that the inquiries on Google right now into moving to New Zealand has just in the last 3 months gone up 2,000%. All right. A small little fact. There's so many rich people buying property in New Zealand because that's where they're going when the shit hits the fan, that the prices are being raised, and New Zealand is very upset about it. But it's not just they're buying these massive estates, they're spending millions to build nuclear safe bunkers underneath them in New Zealand, right? Meanwhile, we're here arguing over who's protesting what at some university or genders or whatever the hell else we want to argue about. This is madness. And this is why I'm on antacids every single day. I get a break once in a while, but I'm telling you folks, if you want to be at peace, don't watch the news. I don't mean don't just watch one, just watch the whole thing. Watch left, right, middle, center. Just kind of soak it all up. And yeah, you're going to need medical intervention. And that's my fate in life. But I accept it willfully because it's the best thing I got going. But that's the best answer I can give you. I could describe the madness of politics on this town all day long. I could point to this, that, and everything else. The stupidity, the absurdity, the ignorance, the arrogance, you name it. So what? So what? Right? The only thing I can say is the political instability now, the hyperpartisanship that we have gotten to, which is really almost off the charts. While it's not good, the principal problem, though, for me, and I believe for the human race, is that it is a distraction which is holding back getting this job done, which we are very close to getting done. Because you see, you may elect a president, but that president's not going to be there but 4 years, maybe 8. We get disclosure, and disclosure is forever. We will be in disclosure in a post-disclosure world forever. So it's a bigger accomplishment. It's more profound. And so we need to look towards what can we do to change the narrative globally so well and so profoundly that we can actually get serious reform of both domestic and foreign situations. And the only thing we have is disclosure. And all I can say, folks, is we're doing the best we can, but we need help. We need more support. Steven Spielberg was just interviewed recently, because he's got a movie coming out in 2026, and he's asked about, are you a believer? Which is a stupid question. And Steven Spielberg is a really good guy, and he just kind of danced around that. Well, I'm a believer, but I've never seen anything, but I know. And he just goes and dances around it and everything else. I'm not trying to criticize Mr. Spielberg. He's done a lot to help engage this issue, or at least present this issue to us. But he's not able to sit in front of that person and say, the reason that I'm doing this stuff is because I know damn well there's an extraterrestrial presence. As long as people in power and influence and money continue to dance and hold back so that this movement cannot get the job done, they will suffer along with the rest of us.
These are sobering thoughts, my friend.
I mean,
Very
if you want to ask a
sobering
specific
thoughts.
question about a specific political thing, I'll try to answer it as
No, no,
nonpartisan as
no, no.
possible.
That's been a good answer. Let's move forward into the conversation to the extraterrestrials themselves,
Fair enough.
because we're now in a world of psionics. We're now in a world in which more and more people are taking it as a given that they're here and now focusing on the fundamental questions. Who are they? What is their motive for being here? How do we establish meaningful contact and communication? And so I'd like to have your view on how you're approaching post-disclosure, because that's one part of the equation is what you've been talking about. How do we get the political elites, the political infrastructure, the president of the United States to own up to the obvious? But I think, in my view, disclosure is happening with increasing velocity independent of the US government.
Careful now. What
So
you just said is that the coming out of information from more inside people, like witnesses and so forth, that element of small d disclosure, okay, is speeding up, which is true. But that
yeah,
small d disclosure, meaning that the amount of information coming up from now much more inside sources over the last 7 years is exceeds the previous 70 substantially. Okay. But again, that's not disclosure capital D, right? That is simply more stuff happening. Now,
yeah,
a
but
lot of this stuff is helping us get to maybe get to the political resolution of this, setting up the president. All right. And so
let me frame it in a different way.
yeah,
On virtually every issue, the governments are failing us. And part of the predicament of the public is thinking that the governments are actually going to solve the problem when it's clear that they are not. We've had this discussion about climate change.
yeah.
There's no will among the governing elites to actually deal seriously with climate change. And so part of the discussion is, so then if it's we, the people, that have to somehow engage with it, how do we do that absent government proactive activity?
I got a
My
simple
view
answer
is
for
we're
that
in the
one.
same situation with regards to disclosure. It seems clear to me that the governments are not going to actually do it until there's a sufficient body of non-governmental awareness and pressure that is acting as if it's true. That will lay the groundwork for the government. So I want to parse it one more layer and then get your response. So one thing, for example, when I was working with the New Paradigm Institute, we're at the Congress, we're pounding on the doors, we're trying to get the Congress to do something. And one of the reasons why I moved on from the New Paradigm Institute is because I wasn't satisfied doing that anymore. It feels to me that the real action is among the citizenry. The real action is among those who are assuming disclosure, assuming the reality of the presence, and are taking meaningful steps to do that. As example, in our extraterrestrial studies program, we've partnered with transdimensional mapping. And what we're doing now is training people all over the world in how to establish meaningful communication with extraterrestrials. I'm an example. I took Bertie Jaworski's course, and I had my first experience with communicating with an extraterrestrial in an incontrovertible way. That has changed my life. So, do I spend my time trying to put pressure on congressional bureaucrats who have already been bought, sold, and delivered? Or do I put my energy in empowering people around the world to begin their own citizen diplomacy, their own diplomatic relations with these beings who appear to be very interested in it. So I just want to lay out those two models, shall we say, of interacting with this very complex phenomenon, honoring that it's all important. I agree that capital D disclosure and small d disclosure are essential, but I don't want to put all my eggs in the capital D getting Donald Trump to disclose, and we really can't make motion until he does so. I'd rather put my energy in where I have room to maneuver and the capacity to actually make a difference in people's lives. What would be your comment on
that? It's a classic case of you can walk and chew gum at the same time. All right. What I mean is this. The last 78 years has been strictly on this subject worldwide, a citizen science, research, activist, journalist, even filmmaking enterprise, meaning the regular citizens have engaged the issue, formed organizations, and done a tremendous amount to educate the world on this issue, writing thousands of books, hundreds of documentaries, researching tens and tens and tens of thousands of cases. And it did all of this while no government in the world was willing to formally indicate that what they were doing meant anything at all, because everything they were focusing on, every book behind me, was about something that didn't exist. All right. Not only that, but particularly in the US, but in other countries, they actively interceded. In other words, they undermined the ability of people to do this, made it a little bit harder, and so forth, demean the issue, stigmatize it, intellectual ghetto, all that stuff. In other words, we're going to make it as hard as you can, but we did it anyway. And we've been doing it for 78 years. So I have nothing but incredible admiration for, particularly in the United States, taking advantage of the fact that we are a democratic republic with free speech and a number of, fine rights. We've operating within those rights. We've managed to move this issue forward. It's not the only issue that people have come together to try to resolve outside of government, right? Basically the entire civil rights movement, which gets underway after the Civil War in 75, going on for the next 90 years, was pretty much a citizens movement. A lot of people suffered enormous amount of effort by citizens to finally get a Civil Rights Act in 1968. So it's like, I get that, all right? But what's at stake here is even greater than that. And so in that 78 years, right, when the citizens were trying to get this issue that the government said didn't exist, there was another issue that everyone acknowledged did exist. And that was the rise of nuclear weapons and the nuclear arms race. That there was no suppression there. Everybody understood. And how much did we accomplish there? Almost nothing. 78 years. And there have been marches and somewhat organizations and anti-nukes and this like that. But overall, I'll be honest with you, the anti-nuke movement has been less effective than the truth embargo movement, to be honest with you. All right. So these two things alone, not being able to get this nuke issue resolved in a timely way, not being able to resolve the ET issue, has put us where we are today. And so that's just the reality of it. And so I want to see people do all of the things you're talking about. Most of what you're talking about is essentially post-disclosure preparation, right? In other words, once we get disclosure, then
just
the real work,
disclosure and then getting on with it.
But you can assume disclosure. Unfortunately, you're just not going to get the resources. We could spend decades and decades more making a little bit of progress, or we can get it done. In other words, now to be able to engage this issue, post-disclosure will be completely transformed. Until then, we're just barely moving forward a little at a time. So, but the fact is that major social change does not require a majority of people on board. About 7%. Are 7% of the people of this planet pretty much aware of this issue and think it's important? Absolutely. We have reached that critical mass some time ago. All right. Only the resistance to this issue probably transcends the resistance to any other social change that I'm thinking of. Why? Because this issue involves something that's beyond anything we've dealt with before. All right. It's not about, gee, can we resolve the conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics in Northern Ireland? And we did that. No, it's about the fact that we're not alone in the universe. They're engaging us, and we, for national security reasons, will not divulge it. And so I want everything you're doing to continue. I want anything anybody can do to at least educate people. But the idea that we can't count on government, we don't even need to push the government really in a sense because it's feckless and won't get it done. We'll get it the other way. We're out of time. We're just out of time, period. Right? In other words, on the nuclear issue alone, which is tied to this issue, we are out of time. If those nukes get used, all of this effort to try to get together and do the right thing and will be of no value at all. And so we have put ourselves in a corner. All right. And so we have to chew gum and walk at the same time. We need to continue to build consensus amongst people, to create organizations, though, again, most of these organizations are actually already anticipating the post-disclosure world, and that's fantastic. Okay. I mean, there's no need for another organization to come together to go out and start running sightings down, meaning, oh, you had a sighting? Let me go out and, let's talk about it. We don't need any more of that. So what we are is getting post-disclosure stuff, which is good, which is about educating people and getting them ready. But again, we've got to end the truth embargo, right? And that can only be ended by the head of state. I don't care how many, pilots or generals or politicians come forward and say, oh, I absolutely, there's ETs here. I don't care how many of them do it. Unless we get formal action by the heads of state, we're not going anywhere. That's the way the world works. That's the way it's worked for some time. Right? There are things that cannot be accomplished if the government is not on board in the sense that they are confirming what the issue is and acknowledging that it deserves to be dealt with. And they're not going to deal with it. Or if they're going to deal with it, they're going to deal with it in secrecy. And so the idea that we have to go around government, forget about it. Okay? Have we been able as a civilization, just as a group of people, to come together and get rid of the nukes? No. Not even close. Have we been able to get rid of genocide? No, not even close. Right? And a list of other awful things. What we have is a lot of good people that would like to do the right thing, that are trying to do the right thing in a world in which doing the right thing is becoming increasingly difficult to the point of impossible. And it's not their fault. I didn't invent nuclear physics. I didn't build any of the bombs. I don't have any kids. I'm not trying to be a pain here. I'm not trying to throw shade, but I haven't contributed to population growth. But governments and organizations have done nothing to really deal with that issue. And there were things they could do, but they didn't. Okay, so fine. Here's the deal. 13,000 nukes, 9 nuclear nations, 8 billion people, 2 billion of which are in desperate states and are trying like hell to illegally cross into other countries. That is the situation. It is existential. Right? It's like you're on the operating table and you're in the operating table and you need immediate treatment or you're going to die. And getting together, in a group and just, thinking good thoughts is not going to be enough. We need both. You're doing that stuff, and that's great. That you're going to create the State of the World Forum. Fantastic. Totally support it. The State of the World Forum is probably and hopefully going to happen in the post-disclosure world. And the State of the World Forum is an almost pure post-disclosure entity designed to deal with the opportunity that disclosure will bring. Exactly. But if we don't get disclosure, I'm not optimistic that it will matter at all. It is game time. We need people with substance, power, influence, and wealth to finally fund this activist movement, right? And it is the least funded activist movement of size in the history of the human race.
Exactly.
It is unbelievable how little money. We need
Oh, yeah.
resources, okay? And spending that money to buy a $4 million house in New Zealand and build a $2 million bunker underneath it is not going to help, right? It's not gonna work for you. But putting some money into the activist work right now, and I know all the organizations could very well work. I'm really pounding this, aren't I? I'm really being a pain in the ass. I'm sorry, but I've just reached the limit. I've
Yeah,
reached the
no, it's
limit.
clear.
You
It's
know, it's
clear.
like I went through all of that. I went through the 60s. I saw the marches. I saw a million people descend on Washington, D.C., mad as hell, wanting an end to the Vietnam War that went on another 6 years and
Yeah.
didn't end until finally the President of the United States decided, I think I'll end it for my political reasons. I've seen this. I've seen
Over and
this.
over, over and over.
We now have got to get action. And let me tell you that ending a war is really an unpleasant activist movement. It's brutal. You got to keep pointing out all the dead bodies. You got to show the awful imagery. It's just a terrible, terrible thing. And the best you can hope for is the war will end and the dying will stop, knowing that another war will probably start later. But yet, boy, did we give that activist movement a run. And now we've had 5, 6 more wars since then. Ending the truth embargo. It's not like ending a war. It's transitioning the entire planet into a new paradigm.
Exactly.
But I mean, so as an activist movement goes, this is as good as it gets. And the
Yeah.
only reason it isn't steamrolled right into the post-disclosure world is the United States government, because of the nuclear issue and the nuclear arms race, which these governments were at fault, right? The ETs did not build those nuclear weapons. The
No.
ETs turned them off because they started that nuclear arms race. They have lived in this existential reality for all these decades, thinking if we do anything wrong, we're going to have a nuclear war, and the ET thing is too scary, and therefore we will do everything we can to maintain this lie, even in the face of the obvious truth, even if we have to make an utter fool of ourselves on the stage day after day after day. We have to maintain this truth, and they still can't quite give it up. It is a dilemma and a circumstance that historians are going, if there are any historians left, are going to seize on and write books about
They're very
forever.
deeply.
It is that big a
Yeah.
deal. And so I want people to do all the things you're talking about. But if I've got an audience in front of me, I don't care what that audience is. I'm going to start making this point. It's time to put up, right? It's time to get it done. And getting things done requires resources, right? If you think you're going to solve global warming without resources, not going to happen. Get rid of nukes without resources, not going to happen, right? We have to have resources so you get what you support. You get what you fund. If you put billions of dollars into arms race, you get a nuclear arms race, right? If you put billions of dollars into every effort to find ways to minimize nuclear weapons, to start cutting them back, you get nuclear reduction. But that's not what we're doing. We're funding the very things that are going to kill us. And again, the distractions are always there. You've got huge numbers of very, very well-meaning people who have put millions and millions and millions of dollars into the climate change issue and the fact that things are getting warmer. I happen to absolutely believe that is true. I'm well aware of the damage we're doing to the environment. And so they're funding the hell out of this. What good is that going to do if we have a nuclear war, right? They won't fund that. They won't fund getting this truth embargo ended so we can maybe reflect on the world, but they're going to fund untold millions of dollars into something that's still maybe 50, 60 years down the line. I mean, there's going to be consequences, some bigger hurricanes or something, but in terms of a massive existential impact on the world, no, it's a generation or two down the line. So let's spend billions of dollars on that. But by God, let's don't fund any of this truth embargo stuff. Let's don't fund, nuclear nonproliferation. Somehow it'll all work out. You see the imbalance here, the
Yeah, no,
asymmetry.
I do
This
indeed.
is
I
what
live it.
keeps me
I
up
live
at
it.
night.
Yeah, I live it. Thank you,
Jim,
Steve.
you're a saint for putting up with this shit for me today. But I just after the
You've
last
had
three
it.
weeks of
You've had
watching the
it.
news and stuff,
Yeah.
I just had to let it go, man.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to close us out, and I'd like to make an observation about Steve today for our community because it's been very strong. But what Steve said at the beginning, he's actually exemplified because the stresses of a world careening out of control are beginning to affect us internally more and more.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure.
So, you've been on antacids, for the last, number of weeks or months because you're just dealing with the stresses and just we get up and look at the news and just when we think it can't get any worse, you got a 50% embargo on Canadian iron that goes into effect at midnight last night. And then something happens in Europe and then something happens somewhere else. And we're in this place that causes us in our stress to begin to want to act in violent ways. So the more stress we have in the system, the more danger we're in that somebody somewhere is going to break and we're going to have the disaster that Steve's been talking about quicker than the twinkling of an eye.
The number one, the number, if you have to point to one single thing that you would want to elevate to be the thing you're most worried about, if it's a single thing, it's a terrorist nuke. And there's been some
Yeah.
articles recently about that. In other words, there, an accidental launch of a missile by a nation, sure, it's almost happened. An actual deliberate launch of a weapon by another nation could happen. But what's even more likely is a terrorist nuke. And how we deal with that, I simply don't know. And another point is that we pushed the envelope pretty far. We've pushed the planet Earth to the limits. We've pushed the population level to the limits. And as a result, it's increasingly difficult for people in the wealthy nations, in the nations that have so much going for them, to be comfortable. Nobody's comfortable hardly anymore, right? The whole idea of like you have, decent life and whatever, and you just enjoy it. No, you can't. And part of the reason is that, and this is both a good and a bad thing, is that we now live in a world where it's possible for every single person to be generally up to speed on everything else going on and everything that happens in this world. You can find out about it if you want to, and even if you don't want to. And so the dilemma that we put ourselves into, the failure
Exactly.
to end the arms
Exactly.
race, the
Exactly.
failure to end proxy wars, the failure to waste all the resources that is leaving billions of people in terrible straits. All of that is now making, unless you're living in a few very select countries, and even they, I think, are starting to feel it. Everybody is not happy, and that's not good, right? I mean, hey, what's the point of advancing forward and doing the right thing and trying to make a better world for your kids, right?
By
If
the way,
you're going to be
Andrew,
miserable.
uh, Cameron Bailey is asking a very pertinent question given your remarks. Could we be living in an idiocracy?
Idiocracy. Yeah, this is a
Idiocracy.
movie from
Thank you.
about 25 years ago, which it's a cult movie, and it's amusing and it's kind of semi-true because, again, when you're spending trillions of dollars
Yeah.
on weapons and nukes and armies and bases, you got less money for everything, including education. And as civil unrest gets better, that affects. So we have a decline in the ability to educate. In other words, we got 8 billion people in this planet now. Since the war, we've had more than 8 billion people because a lot of people have died. So God knows the total number of people that have been born into this world since 45, maybe 11 billion. And over a very short amount of time, another billion are going to show up. And every one of them comes into the world knowing squat. They're just another kid, just a little baby girl or boy comes into the world. And every one of them's got to get educated. All right, that's another billion. They've got to be educated,
We're
costs money.
closing down
Got to
the
be fed and
Department of
clothed.
Education. Yeah.
That's right. And is it getting easier to do that? No, it's not getting easier.
It's
And so
unbelievable.
we've pushed it to the limit,
Yeah.
right? And thank God that there is a way out, right? And I believe it is disclosure and entering a post-disclosure world in which open contact will follow. There is a way out,
Yeah.
and it would be, I think, lack of common sense not to conclude that that is not an accident. That when the moment we dropped those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the ETs pretty much knew exactly where things were going after that, right? They've been around. This is not their first rodeo. And they knew, okay, yeah, I get it. That's where it's going. And we've had 78 years of worldwide engagement, very complex. We know a lot about the ETs, a lot more than people know. Most people have no idea how much we know about the ETs. And so they've been engaging us. Now, only they know why they just don't come down, take over, right? Okay, we're in charge now. Cut the crap. You know, we're going to get rid of the nukes and do that, whatever. Here's some great birth control technology, whatever. Just take, I don't know. They, I'm sure, have their reasons. They are apparently not going to do that. There are things they do, right? So I don't know what their limits are. I know this, that everything that's happened is simply not, oh gee, let's just involve ourselves now. No. They are traveling through this critical 78 years where we're taking it to the limit. All the stuff we used to do going about thousands of years, decided to say, let's take that, multiply it by 1,000 and see where it goes. They're riding this historical time with us. They're giving us messages, right? And they're doing things. And I think, for instance, look, you brought it up earlier. What happened in the last 3 months, which actually started 2 years ago, was the biggest UFO flap of history in history.
Exactly.
And it was
Exactly.
primarily not saucers, right? If it had been thousands of or hundreds of saucers, that would have been a little too much. And so they were using their plasma technology, whatever the hell they do. They have controlled plasma, they can move around. That's what they did with the Foo Fighters. That's what they did over the Capitol in 52. And they've always been doing it. But suddenly, starting 2 years ago and then accelerating about 3.5 months ago, suddenly plasma effects are all over multiple locations, almost exclusively military and sensitive facilities, not just nuke facilities. And why is that important? Because if you take 100 plasma balls and fly them all over a mountain in Tennessee, a mountain in Montana, who gives a damn? Who's paying attention? But you fly them over a military facility and everybody's paying attention. And so they created this massive UFO flap at a time when, one, we are close to disclosure, but we're getting the pushback. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Uh, and that may be one reason. And their
And we're closer to
awareness of
nuclear war than ever
and the
before.
awareness of the nuclear threat. You know, they
Exactly.
can read the news. I'm sure they get all the proper stations, and they're seeing that as close. And so they put on this incredible display, which put the government, any government, but mostly our government, in a total untenable position where they can't explain it at all and making them very uncomfortable and embarrassing themselves as usual. But again, is that going to bring disclosure? No, no, but it is certainly making it harder for the government to continue the truth
Exactly.
embargo. Then the question is, how far will they go? And all I can say is this. You can't rule it out, but it is a mistake to think that they will intervene when we finally pull the plug in the human race. It is a mistake to think that they will save the oceans as we start to turn them into a giant trash dump. We don't know what the scope of their engagement is. And so this kind of passive thing where it's like, don't worry, the ETs will take care of it is a mistake. Don't go
Great.
there. There's already so much pressure, pushback against engaging this issue boldly. The last thing we need is like, don't worry, the ETs will take care of it. I'm not counting on that. I'm not counting on that at all. They've been around a long time, and civilizations have come and gone. They don't even exist anymore. And so the idea that we screw everything up and they go away for 1,000 years and come back, see how we're doing, that makes more sense to me than stepping into this fiasco and saying, we'll fix this for you. But they sure as hell are giving us a message that this is where you need to go. We're helping. Okay. But, and I think it's a good thing, we're not going to cram it down your throat. we're trying to put in a position where you will confirm our presence.
Yeah.
And we will then maybe engage you after that. They can end this anytime they want. I think that's a good thing, but again, we are running out of time. And so that is the macroscopic interpretation of
Perspective.
what's
Yeah.
going on now, which is where I have to live because if you get into the details, you go nuts. You go simply crazy. So I'm focusing on the big stuff. I'm focusing on getting that hearing and then getting President Donald Trump, who is the president and therefore will be the president that discloses the ET presence, whether you like it or not, right? History doesn't care. I don't think the ETs care, right? Some president has got to do it. There have been 14 or 13 other presidents, and going all the way back to Truman. They could have gone to the people, the American people, and said, we're not alone. And they didn't do it. And so if it's Donald Trump, well, if anybody has a problem with that, go talk to the relatives of those other 13 presidents because they didn't. And so if he does it, God bless him. And that's what I hope will happen within the next 2 months or less. Again, we're that close.
Let us hope and pray.
Yeah,
Let us
and but
hope
that
and
doesn't
pray.
mean stop the other cool stuff. Doesn't mean get together and talk about the issues in the world.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you, thank you, thank you. Uh, Steve will join the after chat. Those of you who want to continue the dialogue with him, as you can see, he's more passionate this time on Humanity Rising than ever before. And I think that's a measure of our time. So I want to really thank Steve for your courage and your willingness to be as disclosive as you've been. I think it's important for us to feel this urgency as we go throughout our days and lives. Now, tomorrow, everyone, we have a very special treat. We're going to be talking with Jeffrey Sachs, the economist at Columbia University, who most of you know. Like Steve, has very strong positions on a variety of issues. We're going to be talking to Professor Sachs about his understanding of what on earth is going on with Ukraine and Europe and the Trump White House and Zelensky. And if we have time, we'll also talk about what's going on in the Middle East. So that'll be tomorrow on Humanity Rising. Steve, thank you.
When does the after chat start, Jim?
Starts right now.
Oh, right now. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you'll see the link in the chat box.
Ah,
Stan's just putting it. He just
okay.
put it in the chat box. Just click that link,
All right.
and then you also receive the link in your Zoom reminder for today. So we'll continue this dialogue now in the after chat. You
Okay.
got it, Steve?
Gotcha. I got it. Boom.
Cool.
There we go.
Thank you, brother. All strength. See you tomorrow.